then of course you've got your Christmas vacation. Well, or Christmas, not so much vacation, Christmas holiday in Russia.
Holiday,
That's
vacation is a legal term.
it's a legal term. So Christmas holiday that starts, I guess, what, mid-December and goes through to mid-January.
No. I come from the West. Okay, so you know, December 23rd. It's kind of like the limit. Okay,
Hmm.
because you can ask people to come on, but they'll say that they're busy for the holidays, which is fair
Hmm.
enough.
Hmm.
And but then again, everyone has to understand where I live. December 24th, 25th is basically meaningless for most people. There's
Hmm.
some Catholics in Russia,
Hmm.
but the vast majority that are religious and Christian, it is going to be in January. And
Right.
so we have a very peculiar situation there. And then the Bolsheviks screwed everything up with the calendar. So we have New Year's, then we have Old New Year's, then we have Christmas, then we have Old Christmas. So we go through the hoop four times. Okay. Um, and so, but because that's in January, and because my guests come from the Western world, we're kind of straddle the end
Right.
of the month and the beginning of the next month.
Right.
And traditionally, the first 10 days of January, they're not all legal holidays, but
Right.
everybody takes the days off anyway.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
yeah, we're kind of looking forward to it. Absolutely.
um. Yeah. No. That's.
It'll be double duty for you at the end of the month, my friend, and you know that.
Oh,
Okay.
that's right. That's right. Um.
Thank you for coming in this to this late night stream for me. Now, this was something I listened to earlier, and it just made the point about the utter disorder and division of holy days of the Western religion that is still officially Christianity. It infuriates me that Westerners just don't understand their history. I mean, look at this ridiculous discussion between George Samueli and Peter Lavelle about different versions of Christmas on different days. It is, of course, a sign of Christian schism. And the thing is, the pity of it is actually the white people claiming to be Christian don't really believe that Jesus is God, or that God even exists to punish them for their idolatry and blasphemy. And this means that they're doing it. What are they doing it for? They're doing it to, I guess, be part of a Western tradition that goes back centuries, in the hope of reaching God. Who knows? Who knows? But the point is that it's all wrong. Christianity has failed. That's why Peter Lavelle was talking about the Bolsheviks messing it up for the Orthodox Christians and introducing two kinds of calendars. Now, I've just remembered that the difference between the Julian and the Gregorian calendar. So when was the Gregorian calendar introduced? So we're using the Gregorian calendar. And of course the Julian calendar was introduced by Julius Caesar in the year 45 BCE. You see, it used to be called Anno. No. Anno Domini would be after Jesus was born and before. was it? Yes, BC was before Christ. AD was after Jesus was born. So when did the Julian calendar cease to be used? I'm afraid what I am proposing will not be welcomed by people who don't want to change their calendar or their holy day. Anyway, it was instituted by papal bull in 1582 by Pope Gregory the 13th, and that was why it was called the Gregorian calendar. I don't quite know why. It was to space leap years differently, so as to make the average calendar day 365.2425 days long, more closely approximating 365.2422 days. Oh yeah, the Julian calendar assumed incorrectly that the average solar year is exactly 365.25 days long. Okay, I don't. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is that calendars are enormously political. Every time you have a revolution, you're going to change your calendar, as the Muslims did, as the Christians did, and the Japanese did it too. And of course the French revolutionaries, and they nearly drove themselves mad by having weeks with 10 days and years with 10 months, and then they just gave it up. Imagine calling each year of the month a different name. So Mike, who has been waiting patiently for me to start, I was delayed listening to the video of those Muslims complaining about him. He likes trolling Muslims, and I guess I like trolling everybody, including Mike, and Mike likes trolling me. Now, why I think what I'm saying is so earth-shattering is because I know I'm trolling three world religions at the same time, and this is enormously satisfying when you think of the number of people who could be offended if they actually knew what you were proposing. So obviously Westerners don't believe in Christianity, and it's just silly for them to spend so much money at Christmas and just eat chocolate eggs unquestioningly at Easter. If you knew anything about Christianity, you would say, actually, Christmas is not that big a deal for real Christians, because, well, everybody's born, and Christmas was really only about celebrating the birth of Jesus, when the most important thing about Jesus is that he was resurrected and came to life on Easter Sunday. So that's why Easter is more important than Christmas. But the thing is, Westerners don't really believe that Jesus is God, or that he was resurrected. And also there are plenty of Muslims now in their country who will be saying to them, and I hope they will do so more clearly, that Muslims don't think Jesus died on the cross, but was in fact directly lifted up to heaven by God. So he did not pass purgatory. He's already with God, while everybody else has to go to purgatory to reflect on their sins. I believe that is the narrative of both Jews and Muslims. The idea is that we actually, the dead people, they're supposed to be in some holding place, warehoused for the end times. So they're not actually in hell or enjoying heaven. But this is quite controversial. But look, what I'm trying to say is we may be able to help with the salvation of the immortal souls of our ancestors if we correct ourselves and correct any errors they might have done, in order to say that, well, at least our descendants were sensible enough to correct any misapprehension we might have had about our religion, because we didn't have the benefit of the knowledge that our descendants have. So, obviously, living in the 21st century and having the benefit of AI and the internet, I know significantly more than somebody in the pre-internet age. And so I'm able to gather greater amounts of information, analyse them, and form conclusions about them. And my conclusion is that Christianity is wrong. Westerners need to accept this through a trained historian. I'm only an amateur historian, so I hope that some professional historian will just write a book on the basis of my skeleton argument, which is that the age of revolutions displaced the age of monarchy. What kind of revolutions? They would be republican revolutions, starting with the English Revolution, which kicked out their king, followed by the American Revolution, which also kicked out the King of England, and the French Revolution, which kicked out the King of France, and finally not finally, there's going to be more, but the last one we know about, the last major revolution of a major Western great power was in 1918, when the entire Romanov family were exterminated by Russians who were clearly anxious to make the point that they didn't want any restoration of any member of the Romanov family. After 1918, there were, Greece is now a republic. So we can see that monarchy hasn't survived particularly well in the West, and now Westerners are so relaxed about monarchy that I keep hearing Americans saying that they wouldn't mind having a monarchy in America, which is totally un-American and disgracefully so. So it saddens me and infuriates me that there are so many Westerners who don't understand their history. Now we come to the subject of Islam. So I'm afraid the Sunnis don't get it either. But the Sunnis, of all people, ought to know that the four rightly guided caliphs were not kings. And when they keep going on about their 4 rightly guided caliphs, they are implying that all the subsequent caliphs were not rightly guided, and that's why the caliphate crashed and burnt. But they still have kings, and when you look up the term emir to see what it really means, it just means national leader who may or may not be king. So the Muslims are being, well, the Sunnis are being deliberately vague because most Sunnis live in kingdoms. But then, of course, there's also Turkey, and they're not a kingdom, they are a republic. Anyway, the Islamic conception of the halal political system of Islam has not been discussed or decided upon because it's a touchy political topic, particularly when so many Sunni Islamic scholars live under a monarchy and they don't want to offend their monarch. But the point is that Islam, of all religions, is very, very firmly against absolute monarchy. But I know modern Muslims prefer to forget about it because there are many, many Muslims who live in monarchies, particularly in the Gulf states, where if you were an Islamic scholar who gave the wrong view about the Quran, you could easily find yourself in jail or having your death warrant signed. But we in the so-called free West, perhaps we can discuss these matters for a bit longer, so we must make the most of our opportunities to express ourselves on the truth as we see it. So what am I proposing? I am in fact proposing that Christians give up their holy days that they don't believe in, because it's really a festival of consumerism, which business organisations prefer than, and maybe they might prefer not to make such a big deal of it in the future. Muslims, they have a really cranky lunar calendar, and this means that Ramadan, the next year, is always 10 days. Is it earlier or later? I can never remember. But anyway, this means that Ramadan, that month of fasting by Muslims, could be any month of the year. I'll look it up for you. Ramadan next year, earlier or later? Yes, it's always 11 days earlier each succeeding year. So that's a reason why you can find that you never know when Ramadan is. And you can remember Ramadans in summer as well as autumn and spring and winter. And I guess it doesn't affect you that much if you're a Muslim, if you're a fasting Muslim, if you live in the tropics, if you live in Mecca where the hours of daylight and night are roughly the same. But if you are a Muslim in Scandinavia, then it would become rather awkward if you lived in the land of the midnight sun. This means that it would just make sense to give it up altogether. I think, okay, there are 2 Eids every year for Muslims, so that's the month of fasting, and I think the other one is the birthday of Muhammad. Yeah, it's always the birthday of some prophet or other. But if you look at Jewish festivals, now the great in that they mark some significant story in the Bible. You know, the day when the Torah was handed to Moses. And there's Passover, and there's Shavuot, and well, anyway, I can't remember all of them, but I mean, there's Tisha B'Av, there's Hanukkah, there's Purim, there's Sukkot. Yeah, I'm just showing off how many of them I know, but the most important one is the Day of Atonement, and I really, really like that one because the Jews can teach us a thing or two about atoning for our sins and admitting them and apologising for them, and yeah, so what they do is they fast for 25 hours on Yom Kippur, and then they go to the synagogue and, you know, apologise to each other, and then there's this thing called Kol Nidre where they renounce they cancel all the vows they made to God in the past year. I know anti-Semites think this means that the Jew will break his promise to you, but not so at all, because if it's a contract, then the Jew will be sued for breaking his promise to you, and yeah, so it's not a good idea. I think this Kol Nidre thing means that, you know, if you're forced to swear an oath because maybe you need to do business with some idolater. Actually, I'm not sure. I mean, even the Jews aren't sure. But anyway, the idea is that you cancel all your promises to God, and then you renew them again. You know, so if you have a book of, you know, promises to God, and then you go through them, it's like, you know, did you really mean it when you said, I swear to God I'm going to kill so-and-so for sleeping with my wife, or whatever it is. Maybe, you know, you've gotten over it and you don't want to kill him, and, you know, maybe not all the promises you make to God are wise or legal, and having the ability to review them on Yom Kippur will help you make wiser decisions in the future. And I think Gentiles would be wiser if they properly celebrated Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And the other Jewish festival is not a festival, I suppose it's a commemoration, and that happens in the summer months, and that's when I think they they don't shower, put cream on themselves, and they look terrible, and they don't shave, and then everybody laughs at them. But that's part of their penance, because on Tisha B'Av, which is always in a summer month, but can be in September on some years. So it's July or August or maybe September. What was I going to say? It can mean that... Okay, let me explain what Tisha B'Av is about. It's the 9th of Av. Anyway, they reserve this time to ask themselves, why, oh why do us Jews suffer? What, oh what have we done wrong? Why, oh why can't we ever learn from the lessons of our history? And words to that effect, questions of that nature. So they obviously haven't worked it out. I tell them, but they won't listen to me because I'm not a rabbi and I'm not even Jewish. But anyway, I know why everybody hates them, and I know why they suffer, and it's because they haven't rank the four Gentile religions, ranking Christianity the least no-hide and Islam the most no-hide. And they haven't worked out the purpose for which God made them his chosen people. And I guess God is making them suffer because he's trying to give them a nudge into, doing what he made them his chosen people to do, which is basically to recommend Islam to Gentiles. And in a way I can understand their reluctance, because they're basically saying, well, if we start doing it now, they'll ask us, why the hell didn't you do it before? And I'm saying, yeah, you'll be asked that question, and then you can say, oh, look, well, we didn't dare because you were so mean to us with your crusades and your pogroms and your inquisitions, and we were afraid of you, so we didn't. And I guess we thought, well, if you end up in hell, we wouldn't mind, because of your idolatry and blasphemy that you should have been able to conclude to recognize was idolatry and blasphemy. And anyway, the Muslims have a clear commandment to admonish those who claim that God has begotten a son. So if God ever thought that we weren't quite fit for the purpose for which he made us his chosen people, he must have made Muslims his second lot of chosen people, and they didn't do it either. And it is true, Muslims have not, at any time of their history, as far as I know, ever obeyed chapter 18, verse 4, which commands them to admonish those who claim that God has begotten a son. And I've confronted Muslims about it, and they say, you see us at Hyde Park, at Speaker's Corner, we do it every Sunday. And I said, no, it doesn't count. If you talk to some passing park visitor, it doesn't count. You have to tell important religious and political leaders like the Pope or the Archbishop of Canterbury, or, well, King Charles even. Well, I say King Charles because he's the most important monarch in the whole wide world that everybody has heard of. So Muslims have to, well, if they're going to obey chapter 18 verse 4, they have to write to either the Pope or, well, preferably they should write to three, to, I don't know, gain Allah points or something. So they should write to the Pope and the Archbishop of Canterbury and King Charles. And I'm going to predict that the Pope will just ignore their letters, and so will the Archbishop of Canterbury. But I think you'll get you have a greater likelihood of getting a proper response from the King, who will doubtless be concerned about the whole institution of monarchy and his immortal soul, if Christianity is indeed idolatry. And in any case, he will have noticed that monarchy has been called by more than one person, has been described by more than one person as an anachronism. And I'm hopeful about King Charles, because he has said nice things about Islam and has said that the world must follow Islam to save the environment, or words to that effect. So I think a letter writing campaign by Muslims to King Charles, and why not, just adapt the letter to the Pope and the Archbishop of Canterbury, to make the point that, you know, that you as Muslims know that Christian faith is basically a house of cards that can be very easily blown away, and once it is blown away, you will have Sharia in the West. That's what you have. And you'll also have peace in the Middle East when the Israelis are, adopt secular Koranism with Israeli characteristics. And once the Israelis do, the Americans are bound to do it. And if the Americans do it, then the rest of the world, certainly its vassal states, will do it. And if all of the Anglosphere become secular Koranist, then the rest of the non-West will too. Countries like China and India and Russia, and then we can all be one big, happy, secular Koranist global family, and get along much, much better. And so the question arises as to, well, what sort of festivals should we celebrate? And we have to somehow reward the Jews and say, look, you know, we'll celebrate your festivals because it's, you know, it's biblical, and what's biblical in terms of narratives is also Quranic, and they're just more fun and meaningful than, you know, summer festivals and winter festivals and spring festivals and well, autumn festivals I know are really harvest festivals. Mike asks if I want to go to a... No, I don't want to go. I want to go to the lunisolar calendar, and this means the Jewish calendar, and it's a particularly useful one because, you know, it has a leap month every, I forget how many, every how many years. So instead of a leap year, it has a leap month, and the great thing about the Jewish calendar is that, you know, its festivals are roughly in season. But this means that this year is 5783, I think. Let me just check. Jewish calendar. Jewish year 2024. So it's 5784. Yeah, the Jewish New Year begins on Rosh Hashanah. Which is around autumn. So the Jewish New Year began on the 2nd of October. So you get the idea. Rosh Hashanah is always around September, October. The Jewish calendar, unlike the Gregorian one, follows the moon's lead, introducing a 19-year cycle with 7 leap years, adding a full month to maintain synchronization with the solar year. The method ensures that Jewish holidays, though varying from the Gregorian calendar by about a month, consistently occur at the same seasonal junctures. There you go. So I think eventually we'll get used to the Jewish calendar, but I'm sure some of you will be attached to, you know, the before the BC and AD thing, which is in any case now called BCE and, you know, CE, which is also political. I mean, when did CE come into use? Let me just check. You know, all these names and change of terminology is is very political. Common Era. So we want to know when it started being used, origins. Yeah, 2005 they started using it. Okay, so shall I have a quick look at Jewish holiday so you all get a good idea of how it's going to be under secular Koranism. Jewish holiday list. So Hanukkah is coming up. Well, I mean, I did mention it earlier. Maybe you don't want to hear it again, but you get the idea. Of course, nobody's forced to, and of course you can celebrate your own if you really care. But I think celebrating these Jewish holidays would tend to address issues of anti-Semitism. I think that would help. Oh, isn't it interesting? Hanukkah actually begins on December the 25th. Yes, I see that the Chabad website actually has brief summaries about what these festivals are. Okay, so Hanukkah begins on the 25th and ends on the 2nd of January, and the next one is called the Fast of Tevet. So that's a day of fasting, mourning and repentance because the Jews were, taken away by the Babylonian Emperor Nebuchadnezzar. I hope I said it right. And that was the destruction of the first temple, I believe. So that's between that. Okay, that's January the 10th next year. So the 15th of Shavat is the day before St. Valentine's Day, and it marks the beginning of a new year for trees. And then in March the 13th is Purim, which is when they celebrate how Queen Esther dealt with Haman, who wanted to exterminate the Jews. And then, of course, in April there is Passover, which is, Easter really for Christians. And for some reason there is a second Passover in May. I haven't heard of that one. And then in May 16th, it's some great sage. I haven't heard of that. It's not it's a minor holiday. Shavuot is Master giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. It's in June, and then there are 3 weeks. It's called the 3 weeks, which is basically Tisha B'Av, when they mourn over the destruction of the Holy Temple and being in exile, and gnash their teeth and tear their hair and rip their garments about why are they in exile and why nobody likes them. And the 15th of Av is August 9th, and that's a kind of, I think it's the equivalent of St. Valentine's Day, because Jewish maidens would go out to dance, hoping to attract fitting suitors. And then there is Rosh Hashanah in September 22nd. So it's a new year. Notice that it is, also the beginning of the academic year. And then Yom Kippur on October the 1st. That's the most important one, because obviously you would like to think as sentient, reasonable, decent, sensible human beings that we would like to learn from our mistakes and atone for them. And after Yom Kippur is Sukkot, 7 days, and I really like this one. So they make themselves a sort of tent, and they just live in it and have picnics and meals and stuff. And yes, and think of what it must have been like to be exposed to the elements when they were wandering for 40 years, seeking the promised land. And then there's something called I can't even pronounce it, and it doesn't really say what it is. Shemini Atzeret and Simcha Torah. It doesn't actually say what it's about. Oh, it just means after the 7 days of Sukkot comes a happy holiday. Anyway, that's it. Obviously you don't have to celebrate it. You can, dip in and, do it if you fancy it. But some of them sound quite fun to me. But I think it's compulsory for every Jew and Gentile to reflect on their sins on Yom Kippur. And I think it would make us wiser and happier. I see Conopsis in the chat. I don't care about viewers. I really don't. I stream when I want to, but it's good that you popped up. I did particularly want to talk about the celebration of holy days under global secular Koranism and how it's going to be. Confession. Mike, that's very Catholic of you. No, you don't have to confess your sins to anyone. You can confess your sins to God in your heart. Maybe you have a confession diary or something, and then you can confess in your diary, for your own sake. It could work for stationary people, like, a book of revised promises. The book of, everybody has their book of, a book of promises that they either want to cancel or roll over into the next year. And confession. I think a lot of people do confess a lot of things online, They confess on Facebook, they confess on Twitter, I mean, like today on Twitter, I was reading this tweet from an Orthodox Christian saying that he wasn't going to be masturbating tonight. So he's already confessed his sin. Oh, did you want to talk to me? Well, it's you're up late. Conops is even later for you now, isn't it? I don't think I will. Well, maybe you can talk another time, but I do want to preserve the integrity of the subject matter, so I feel I should stick to the subject. I have now explained to you how the calendar is going to be under global secular Koranism, and how people of the Abrahamic religions are going to be celebrating their festivals. It's just a recommendation. Obviously, there will be people who don't want to celebrate anything, any of these Jewish holidays because they're anti-Semites, and there's bound to be silly, Muslim people who say, oh, we want to, do a whole month of fasting, when actually the Jewish fasting is so much better, because it says, every now and then we might fast, and we just do it for 25 hours, and then it's over and done with. You don't have to disrupt your schedule, your school, your employment by starving yourself for a whole year, and then working out whether you're on Meccan time if you're in Scandinavia. It's very silly. So my recommendation is far more sensible, and this is this is what I recommend to everyone. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Mike and Conops, for being around. And I'm sure I'll speak to you before too long.